After spending more than 3 decades on the firing line, experimenting with defensive loads and keeping tabs on the political back and forth surrounding ammo laws, I've seen the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or as every shooter in America calls it, the ATF, shift its stance more times than a weather vane in a Texas windstorm. The most troubling part? Lately, they've been reinterpreting well-established laws to squeeze out types of ammunition that have been trusted and legally owned by responsible citizens for generations. One glaring example happened almost 10 years ago, when the ATF set its sights on a perfectly ordinary rifle cartridge, not because the projectile itself had changed in any way, but because they decided to tweak how the law should be read. That same tactic is now creeping its way back into the spotlight, and this time, it's high-performance handgun ammo that's caught in the crosshairs. At the center of this controversy are 3 of the most trusted names in personal defense: Speer Gold Dot, Federal Hydra-Shok, and Hornady Critical Defense. These aren't obscure rounds, these are go-to choices for everyday carriers, homeowners, and law enforcement professionals from coast to coast. Ironically, the very traits that make these loads so reliable, things like bonded jackets that stay together through barriers, polymer tips designed for consistent expansion, and internal construction that avoids clogging, are now being twisted into reasons to accuse them of so-called armor-piercing potential. To understand where this train might be heading, you've got to take a hard look at how the ATF classifies ammunition. Their decisions often rest on whether a round can be fired from a handgun, and whether its materials or construction are deemed too much for civilian use. The loophole? They've leaned for years on some vague and subjective language about what qualifies as sporting purpose. Case in point, the infamous 7N6 round from Russia. That surplus military ammo was used by American shooters for years without issue. But once someone designed a handgun that could chamber it, the ATF slammed the door shut and banned it overnight. The bullet didn't change, just the firearm it could be fired from. And that same kind of logic could be used again, only this time against the very self-defense loads millions of law-abiding citizens rely on every day. Look at Gold Dot from Speer. This wasn't some weekend target load, it was engineered from the ground up for professional duty use. It's built to push through real-life obstacles like auto glass and wood paneling without falling apart. Exactly the kind of performance the Federal Bureau of Investigation demanded when it adopted the M855 green tip, also known as SS109. Gold Dot rounds routinely meet or surpass the 12-inch minimum for ballistic gel penetration, often landing closer to 18 inches, all while keeping their weight and expanding up to half an inch or more. That kind of performance isn't a gimmick, it's exactly what those of us who carry every day are looking for. But to the ATF, it may soon be branded too much for civilian hands. The issue runs even deeper. Gold Dot isn't confined to a single caliber. It's loaded in just about everything: 9mm, 38 Special Plus P, 45 automatic Colt pistol, 10mm auto, and rifle rounds like 223 Remington, 300 Blackout, and 308 Winchester. That widespread availability is both a blessing and a liability. Now that pistol-style firearms exist in what used to be strictly rifle calibers, the ATF sees an opening. We've seen this show before back in the year 2015. The green tip M855 was almost banned, just because someone built an AR pattern pistol that could fire it. Only a massive backlash from the gun-owning public forced them to backpedal. But the legal precedent was never undone. It's still sitting there, ready to be used again. If the ATF decides to start cracking down on what they call excessively capable ammunition, especially if it's associated with law enforcement duty, but still sold on the civilian market, then Gold Dot is likely to be at the top of their list. Its exceptional terminal ballistics, its use across multiple calibers, and its massive popularity make it a high-profile target. And just like last time, the threat wouldn't come from the ammo changing, it would come from how bureaucrats choose to define it. This isn't fear-mongering, it's a sober reality. Whether you carry for protection, hunt with a carbine, or keep a defensive rifle at home, now is the time to pay close attention. From the standpoint of someone who spent decades following ammo laws and watching how they evolve, Federal's Hydra-Shok is yet another example of how quickly the regulatory landscape can shift beneath our feet. This round came about in the aftermath of the 1986 Miami shootout, when it became clear that older-style hollow points often failed to expand properly after passing through thick layers of clothing. To solve that issue, designer Tom Bertzinski introduced a groundbreaking feature, a central post inside the hollow cavity, which redirects fluid pressure outward on impact. The result? More reliable expansion even at lower velocities. Once the Federal Bureau of Investigation adjusted its testing standards in the late 1980s, Hydra-Shok was fine-tuned to meet their new demands, and it quickly became one of the most trusted names in personal defense ammo. But here's the twist: what was once considered a benchmark in self-defense is now being eyed with suspicion. Because Hydra-Shok was engineered specifically to meet law enforcement needs, it fits neatly within the ATF's 2015 Sporting Purpose Clause, a vague and problematic framework regulators use to justify closer scrutiny. The wording suggests that any ammunition developed for military or police purposes, especially if it's sold in common handgun calibers, like .32 automatic Colt pistol, .380 automatic, 9mm, or even .44 Magnum, may require additional oversight. Hydra-Shok is available in all of those cartridges, putting it squarely within the scope of what the ATF considers suspect. And there's another layer to this: what the bullet is made of. Right now, Hydra-Shok still uses a traditional lead core, but with more states moving toward eco-friendly hunting laws and lead restrictions, ammo companies are being pushed to adopt all copper or brass alternatives. That's where things get tricky. Under the Law Enforcement Officers Protection Act, commonly referred to as LEOPA, any solid projectile made from metals like brass or copper that can be fired from a handgun and might defeat soft body armor can legally be reclassified as armor-piercing. Which means if federal updates Hydra-Shok to comply with environmental regulations, they could end up triggering a federal ban, despite the fact that the round has never been involved in a single incident of body armor penetration in real-world use. We've already seen this kind of overreach happen with the 7N6, a military surplus cartridge, chambered in 5.45 by 39mm from Russia. For years, it was legally imported and used by American shooters. But in 2016, the ATF pulled the plug as soon as a pistol hit the market that could chamber it. Even though the importer took the agency to court, arguing there was no evidence of criminal misuse, the judge sided with the ATF, claiming that theoretical armor penetration alone justified the ban. That ruling effectively gave regulators unchecked authority to restrict almost any ammunition they choose, as long as it can be fired from a handgun. Now let's shift focus to Hornady's Critical Defense line. On the surface, it looks like a safe bet. The Flex Tip Expanding Projectile, or FTX, is designed with a soft red polymer plug to encourage expansion even when fired from subcompact pistols with short barrels. It's a favorite among those living in apartment complexes or urban areas, since it minimizes over-penetration. But here's the catch: that distinctive red tip, while highly functional, also makes it a visual lightning rod. It's instantly recognizable and easy for anti-gun media to sensationalize. Add to that the fact that FTX loads show up in everything from traditional lever-action rounds, like .30-30 Winchester, to common concealed carry calibers. And now you've got a round that spans nearly every firearm type, a major red flag for regulatory agencies. This broad compatibility is exactly what raised alarm bells in 2015, when members of Congress questioned then ATF Director Todd Jones over concerns about regulatory overreach. Their argument was simple: when you start targeting ammo based on how many platforms it can be used with, you're not cracking down on criminals, you're punishing everyday, law-abiding Americans. Most shooters just want reliable performance across the board, whether they're training at the range, caring for self-defense, or hunting in the woods. Lawmakers also voiced another concern that hasn't gone away: environmental lawsuits that push for the elimination of lead-based ammunition altogether. And when manufacturers respond to those legal pressures by switching to solid copper or other alternative materials, they often find themselves in dangerous territory. Because under current law, the ATF can deny any exemption if it determines there's substantial evidence that the round isn't mainly used for sporting applications. That one phrase, sporting purposes, has become so loosely defined that it could be twisted to ban nearly every modern hollow point on the civilian market. What was once a legal framework meant to protect officers in the line of duty is quickly becoming a trap for responsible gun owners. And if you carry a firearm, hunt, or keep a carbine for home defense, this should be on your radar because these decisions won't just impact collectors or competitors. They'll affect every law-abiding shooter in the country. From my perspective as someone deeply rooted in America's gun culture, and well-versed in how regulations creep in over time, what we're seeing isn't sudden. But it's unmistakable, a slow-moving expansion of federal oversight that could eventually zero in on proven defensive ammunition like Gold Dot, Hydra-Shok, and Critical Defense. There haven't been any direct rulings from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives targeting these specific loads, at least not yet. But if you've been watching the ATF for any length of time, you already know they don't always wait for Congress to write new laws. More often than not, they publish sweeping rule changes straight into the Federal Register, completely bypassing the normal legislative process and silencing public discourse. This playbook isn't new. Think back to 2015, when the ATF attempted to reclassify the M855 green tip as armor-piercing. That triggered a national backlash not just from gun owners, but from members of Congress who saw it as blatant regulatory overreach. The agency eventually backed off, but here's the kicker. The underlying policy rationale? It was never scrapped. It's still sitting there waiting to be reactivated at the stroke of a pen. Let's cut to the core what's really at stake here. Gold Dot is engineered with a bonded lead core that holds together on impact, ensuring expansion even after passing through intermediate barriers. Hydra-Shok uses its patented center post design to maintain expansion when penetrating heavy clothing. Critical Defense incorporates a soft polymer plug to help short-barreled pistols reliably expand hollow points. These aren't novelty features. These innovations are the result of years of engineering, designed to stop threats, not penetrate soft armor. None of these rounds are built using hardened materials like steel, tungsten, or brass coarse components that actually define true armor-piercing ammunition under federal law. Yet, because of shifting political winds, broader environmental policy, and evolving interpretations of what constitutes a threatening design, these trusted loads could end up on a federal watch list. Here's the real problem. Under the Law Enforcement Officers Protection Act, commonly known as LEOPA, the question isn't what the round was meant to do, it's how it's constructed. If a projectile can be fired from a handgun and either contains specific prohibited metals or has a jacket that exceeds 1/4 the total bullet weight, it can be reclassified as armor-piercing. It doesn't have to defeat a vest in testing. It just has to meet those material conditions. That means if bonded copper ever lands on the restricted list, or if a lead-free redesign tips the weight ratio in the wrong direction, then ammo like Gold Dot, or new eco-compliant versions of Hydra-Shok and FTX, could be regulated right off the shelves. Making things worse is the public's ongoing misunderstanding of hollow-point bullets. Anti-gun activists and media outlets continue to label them cop-killer rounds, despite mountains of data proving otherwise. Standard law enforcement body armor routinely stops these bullets in real-world use. But the facts rarely stand in the way of political outrage. All it takes is one high-profile incident, one courtroom display, or one marketing claim like enhanced barrier performance to paint a round like Hydra-Shok Deep or Critical Defense as dangerous and unnecessary. Suddenly, that trusted ammunition becomes a political target more symbolic than factual. The ATF tends not to go after everything at once. They take gradual steps. First, it's foreign surplus cartridges with steel cores. Then, it's ammunition with broader applications rounds that bridge the gap between rifles and handguns. If there's no strong pushback, they move on to high-performance handgun loads with bonded jackets or polymer tips, a modern round like Hydra-Shok Deep, which was engineered for better performance in gelatin while maintaining safe expansion, could be flagged simply because of its increased capability, even if it still meets every safety and performance guideline. Even when Congress stepped in during the M855 episode, it was only a temporary pause. Political climates change fast. One new administration, one well-publicized crime involving a mainstream caliber, and the regulatory machinery revs up again. And it won't be obscure military cartridges under threat. It'll be the trusted, proven loads carried daily by civilians and law enforcement alike. That's why awareness beyond the range matters. Watching for changes in the Federal Register, participating in public comment periods, and staying in contact with your representatives, those things matter just as much as stocking up on quality ammunition. The Second Amendment protects more than just firearms. It safeguards the ammunition that makes those firearms functional. Bureaucrats often count on apathy. What keeps them in check is vigilance from people like us. The bottom line is this: Gold Dot, Hydra-Shok, and Critical Defense are among the most effective self-defense rounds available today. They're well-tested, widely trusted, and used by professionals and civilians alike. But their effectiveness is a double-edged sword. Because they work so well, they become high-profile targets in a world where political optics often outweigh technical facts. In the current climate, the best-performing ammunition is often the first to face scrutiny.